Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine, commentate along, drop in facts and opinions and observations, and try to guess what my guests' favourite things about each instalment might be.
Hi Toby, Daisy Connolly here, retired comedian. Today I'm going to talk to you about the 5 things that I love about my Who story, which is Terror of the Zygons.
Well, welcome everybody. I've just recorded a fantastic, erudite, witty, off-the-cuff intro to this episode, and Audacity very blithely informed me as I looked at it just to check the levels that it had been recording through the MacBook microphone and not this very good broadcast microphone that I'm speaking into right now. I mean, I was speaking into it before, but it wasn't listening. And I don't want you to have an echoey introduction. Nobody likes an echoey introduction. So I'm doing it again and will not be as witty, erudite or spontaneous as I was on the first one. So having started with the end of Bullseye by saying, here's what you could have won, I'm now here to introduce episode 3 of Terror of the Zygons, a story that unusually for this, because I usually sort of dive in, the whole purpose of this really is for me to be able to just dive into an episode, say what I see, and to try and mine it for gold without doing any preparation, without doing any research, because the other podcasts that I do take quite a lot of preparation and research. But hopefully there's enough here for you. But actually, on this occasion, because I hadn't seen the story for quite a while, and because I was in the mood just to watch a bit of Doctor Who, which I'm pleased about, because I think sometimes when you're producing content, suddenly your what you would have done in your leisure time becomes part of your work, and that's always a bit sad. I think when something becomes work, you can lose sight of why you love doing it in the first place. People always say, "Oh, it's lovely if your hobby can become your job." Well, the whole point about hobbies is they're supposed to take you away from your job. Fortunately, I don't really have a job. I just have a series of hopeful endeavours that occasionally bear the scantest of fruit for a season or two, and then I have to find out how to continue that metaphor and fail, which is the story of my life. But you get my drift. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed watching Terror of the Zygons for pleasure, although it was interesting as I watched it with half an eye to know that I would be talking about it later, how different from each other each of the episodes are, and how the story is never quite what I imagine it to be. It's a sort of curious hodgepodge in terms of structure and in terms of the dynamic of each individual episode. Nonetheless, it went up in my opinion. Not that I'd ever had a downer on it. I'd always thought of it as a good solid. All Hinchcliffe and Holmes to me is its base level is above average because they're such good productions and because the tone to me is sort of spot on. The humour is funny. The danger is palpable and plausibly done. The production values are pretty rigorous, and it all has what Philip Hinchcliffe refers to as muscular storytelling, which I rather like. It forms a solid backbone to a presentation of a fun, witty, science fiction, mad science fantasy. But if it has that muscular dynamic, it makes the child in me feel that I'm watching something pretty important, pretty tough, which always makes the child in me feel a little grown up, and the child in me always liked feeling a little grown up. Now, I think what we need to do today, as I rapidly approach 50, is that being in touch with your, if you're grown up, trying to retain some of your childhood sense of wonder and joy and lack of cynicism is important. So the grass is always greener, I suppose. But the thing that you haven't got is the thing you should always try and keep in touch with, just as a reminder, I think. But anyway, we have got Terror of the Zygons. We've got all of Tom Baker's Doctor Who stories, and aren't we lucky? I think my main problem with Zygons in the past has always been, my main couple of problems. Well, no, my main problem. It's the Scarrison. It's big enough for two problems. But that always, that always made me sort of see the story as compromised in execution. What I could never show to other people. But then, of course, in that excellent Doctor Who magazine article, the class of 7G, one of them was Mick Jagger's child, I seem to believe. To see if modern kids could handle old Doctor Who, they were quite cool about it. They were like, yeah, old special effects, fine, can live with it. And in fact, my kids never even had a problem with black and white. I mean, I didn't show them much Doctor Who because I thought that would be indoctrination. So neither of them are fans. But they're like, yeah, old special effects are fine. I don't know why I've made them speak that, because I've noticed that modern young people do funny things with pinching their vowels. In fact, they sort of owe them a bit like the Zygon's mouth. Old TV dad. Do they talk? They do. There's something funny about the modern vowels. Anyway, we don't want echoey introductions, and we don't want people destroying our vowels. So let's go to a time when everything was better. The 17th of September 1975 was better because I was barely 2, so I had no issues with anything. It was all taken care of for me. In a Doctor Who story written by Robert Banks Stewart, directed by Douglas Camfield, scored by Geoffrey Bergen. Only 2 stories have those 3 things going on at the same time, and that's The Seeds of Doom, which I've already done and loved, and this one, which is Terror of the Zygons. We are on part 3. I'm accompanied by Daisy Connolly, and I'm going to see what she thinks of this episode after I've done this one myself. So let's see if we can mine it for positives. Come with me to the moors, and we will see if Doctor Who escapes from the stop-motion Scarrison with its excellent flipper action. On a count of 3, 2, 1. Okie dokie. I'm not going to skip intro. I'm back on BritBox. We had all sorts of problems with it, but it got sorted out. It got sorted out means I didn't sort it out. Cheryl Lee was on the blow at Amazon for about half a day. And it turned out because we'd registered the remote control to me, because the remote control broke, so I used a remote control on my phone, which meant I registered the Amazon account to me, but the Prime account is hers, so I don't have BritBox. Actually, she does, even though I signed up for it, but it's using her account. Who knows? Anyway, here we have the excellent Broton, the not so bad Scarrison. It's always good to use a point of view shot, isn't it? Well done, Douglas Camfield, to minimise the model effects. And Tom Baker rolling around in the gorse very gamely. I think that's not a bad shot. Oh yes, here's Harry having been that's a bit of a model, isn't it? That's a nice sort of mix of the location film mixed with the model, not brilliantly, but then you have the cutaway of the claw hitting it all. It all helps to sort of to show the viewer that they're not just watching one thing, as it were. I love the way that Woodnut manipulates the controls. He's worked out a way to do it in a slightly alien way, and the way that Camfield shoots the Zygons, close up here at a slight angle, so you've got a little bit of a profile. They do they have to keep Harry alive because they want to replicate him, don't they? Although they never quite do. And yes, I seem to recall I remember there's some confusion. I listened to a podcast recently talking about this where they didn't quite get why the Scarrison had gone away, but I think it's made fairly obvious is that he got the tracer off his hand, and then when the claw that we saw went to squash him, which is why we got the close-up of the claw, it shattered the tracer, which, although, as my brothers would probably point out, but it hasn't crushed the gorse, which you would probably do now, but come on. They haven't got a big combine harvester or something for a split-second shot. It's it's always Angus Lenny was in so much stuff when I was a kid. He was in all the war films that we watched. Although now, of course, everyone talks about him being, Shui the chef in in Crossroads. And there's a brilliant clip that they quite often used to illustrate how bad Crossroads was, of him finding a spider on a piece of food, I think, and sort of turning it to the camera to show. And it's and that's odd to think that not long after he's done all those big movies, but maybe they weren't. Well, no, The Great Escape was a huge movie, and then is off to Birmingham to do Crossroads, sandwiched between appearances in Doctor Who, because I remember being quite surprised that he played Storr in the Ice Warriors, because Storr in the Ice Warriors in the book is written as this sort of big burly Francis de Wolfe type, and he ends up being little Angus Lenny going, anything to do with technology is terrible. And you think, really? And you go, oh, it's science, isn't it? You like science. Science is rubbish. I mean, he'd be presenting on GB News now. Because he just didn't like all science, You're going to walk on the floor? That's been made by science. Yeah, pesky science. Making floors. I'm not standing on floors. They're the product of science. Anyway, I'm sure we'll get onto that when we do. And he's got a flappy beard that blows in the wind. Whereas his beard in this is real. It looks, again, it's not quite, I tend to imagine him being a clean-shaven fellow, so it's nice to see him. Anyway, look at this. Look how delighted the Doctor is to see Sarah Jane, and vice versa, and she's got such gusto, hasn't she? And this is they're a great combination, because he's slightly detached and he's a sort of Sarah is a sort of conduit between Tom Baker's Doctor and the Brigadier. There is a slight distance, I feel, between the Doctor and the Brigadier, because the Doctor, this Doctor, is slightly more alien than Tom Baker's, than John Pertwee's. And I rather like that Sarah acts as a sort of go-between between the Doctor and the Brigadier, and Courtney is very sort of down to earth and straightforward, and Tom Baker is almost deliberately, sort of obtusely detached and alien. And I think that's a slightly, Pertwee was pesky and testy with the Brigadier, but there was and there's underlying affection in both characterizations. But I quite like the fact that I think this Brigadier isn't quite on the same wavelength as Tom Baker's Doctor, and I like that. I love the way that they slightly mock the Duke of Forgill there. And the Doctor, rather than being embarrassed to be caught doing the impression, just sort of goes, yes, hello, there you are. Woodnut, of course, absolutely judges this perfectly. He's got these anarchic, obtuse interloper as well. The Doctor is, sarky and sort of rude, whereas the Brigadier is sort of deferent to the Duke's position. And Sarah's, very much the journalist here, and he deals with them all by being, rather aloof and sort of tersely cooperative. Now, yes, there's it was when I was doing Running Through Corridors that. Well spotted. Good spotting the thing acting, Angus. Well done. Yeah, he does that very well. The hand to the face, the dry throat. You can tell he's got very scared of that, which is weird because I think he's then quite chatty about it later. But that in that moment, it's it's what I call Camfield realism. I've never called it that before in my life. I've decided to try to start calling it that, but it's the way that John Levine reacts as well in the previous episode with the airlock thing. It's just Camfield getting his actors to beef up the tension. Everyone take it really, really seriously. And yeah, so here we're having the explanation of the plot, which is very useful. Why, and it tying in with the myth as well. Why why is the Loch Ness monster only seen sometimes? Because it's got this access to the loch via the sea. And of course, the beautiful irony here is that they're all, sort of saying, "I'm sorry, Your Grace. Yes, this alien's a mad idea," and he's, this aristocrat, rather disdainful of any idea of aliens, which is perfect. Doctor Who, of course. Except for the fact, of course, that he is an alien. So that's a lovely extra level to what is a wonderful Doctor Who dynamic of, our regulars talking very straightforwardly about ridiculous things, and somebody from our world, as it were, going, "Well, I've never heard such nonsense in my life," but actually he's the alien. And this is and our Sister Lamont is so scary, isn't she? Oh yeah, I mean, Bernard's just heard that Zygon. I don't know if you could hear Bernard then. Poor old Angus. Now that's James Muir, one of the soldier without the hat on. He's a regular extra. Nobody's ever interviewed him. I don't know if he's still around. But he's in so many Doctor Who's. And I think he gets quite a lot of action in this. Poor old Angus. And I think I remember being quite shocked when I discovered Angus Lenny was Angus, because I'd considered him a fairly minor character, because he gets killed, just over halfway through. But again, a sign that if an actor's available, they'll do a job. Camfield's great at all of this stuff. Getting soldiers in the distance, and then Levine's mark is here, so that there's a decent camera angle on him. All of this stuff looks good under Camfield's watch, and I love the half glimpses of the Zygon through the trees. Look at that. It's a bit like that shot, from the point of view of the airlock. Just having, it's such a great looking alien creature that a glimpse of it in a distance, flitting through some trees, is a marvelously alien thing, and it doesn't linger on it. Its effectiveness is the fact that it's in the distance and it's only fleeting, and that's not because it's a bad costume. There's James Muir again. He's got his hat on now. He's very recognisable. He's got a sort of flat boxer's nose and slightly sunken eyes. But he was. I know a lot of directors found him a very reliable supporting artiste. But it's not that the Zygon costume is bad. But it's still showing restraint. Sometimes you can have a brilliant thing, but still only showing a little bit of it is much more effective. And that's a sign of a director who's, it's like with writing, they say kill your babies. Sometimes some of the best bits have to go in order to help the piece. You've got this brilliant costume, and the temptation might well be to, show it from its point of view, or have close-ups of it, hiding, watching the soldiers, or doing all of that, but actually having it a barely glimpsed thing, because the costume could stand the scrutiny of the close-up and would look glorious on film, I'm sure, because they look pretty damn good on videotape, and film always makes sort of glistening alien carapaces that are actually latex look much better than videotape. So admirable restraint. Camfield, or I suppose Camfield with his military thing he'd be Admiral Restraint. Well, no, it's the Navy, isn't it? Michael Bryant would be Admiral Restraint. Anyway, stop. I'm now mixing Army Navy metaphors with / Doctor Who director combos, which I think is a little too niche even for this. I also quite like the fact that they've got no suspicion at all that the Duke of Forgill, who's been patronising and aloof for the whole thing, is in any way a bad guy, because that's just how the aristocracy are. And I love that Sarah is left. It's the, I suppose it's the modern day, if we're talking of this day, equivalent of the twisted ankle, but it's much more positive. Sarah is left behind because she's the one that's going to be doing the research and the investigating, because she's the journalist. This is Peter Simons, who is still around, still working. We I think we did consider getting him for the commentary, because we had so few people. He's actually had a very decent career. In the book, this soldier is Corporal Palmer, who's also in the Three Doctors I mentioned last week, and it was a nice sort of tying up of the sort of random unit corporal, but and that soldier, having only that bit, well, why not make him Corporal Palmer, who's the corporal played by Bernard G. High in episode 2, and sort of tie it all together. But Peter Simons, I did email him about Who's Round, actually, because Zygons was a toughie for me. I got George Galaccio in the end, which was great. But he never replied. He's a friend of a very elderly actor I know called Kim Grant, who is one of the last survivors, if not the last survivor, of the credited cast of Quatermass 2. And I visited him again recently because he lives near the hospital that I go to for my psoriasis checkups. So what I do then is I try and I make a trip to the hospital better by visiting the actors I can in the area. So I visit him, and I usually pop in to see Christopher Benjamin, who lives just up the road as well, who is best friends with David Graham. It's all time. So I have a very odd social calendar. And they all live not far from the hospital that I regularly go to visit for once every 6 months. Anyway, you don't need to know about my medical history. I like both of these guys because they're both sort of suggesting something's going wrong, but it's not too much of it. He could be a surly factotum. The Caber is a nickname. He's a Highland Games champion. That's nice. Yes. And I just think Woodnut is so beautifully sardonic and quietly sort of amused. This sort of aloof disdain that he has, which has a tinge of menace to it. It's a beautifully judged performance. I love this set of steps as well. I love things like this. I think the you'd call it props buying now, would you? The art department in the Hinchcliffe era is great because the Doctor's got a great leather medical bag, hasn't he, in Planet of Evil. I like all this stuff that is sort of old-fashioned and yet timeless in a way that I just think that's a beautiful piece of practical set decoration, isn't it? And I love the way that Sarah sticks her tongue out at the Caber. She does all of that brilliant stuff. She's sort of playful. She undermines, because the Doctor's quite scowly and snappy with her, and she undermines it with a certain sort of humorous rebelliousness that I absolutely love. I love Sarah Jane Smith, and I love Elizabeth Sladen. And I'm sure I mentioned I never got to look at that little tinge of green lighting to suggest we're now in the sort of crossover between Forgill Castle and the Zygon spaceship. Now my brother's probably watching this. I don't know why I'm imagining my brother's watching this and being rude about it and go, well, that torch was handy there. Well, presumably the Zygons use that torch. It's and why wouldn't you? And they go, well, why haven't they got an alien torch? Well, why have an alien torch when you can have an actual torch? And I'm sure the Caber's, next to where he gets that set of steps from, there's a drawer full of batteries. But yeah, so it's become a slightly different episode. Again, it's more sort of, sort of investigation. We've got much more of the Duke of Forgill than we have of Broton this week, because we had none of the Duke of Forgill last week. But I mean, the lovely green lighting here, and there's not much. It doesn't concentrate much on this set because it's it's probably quite minimal, and there's not an awful lot you can do with it. It's supposed to be a sort of cave, isn't it, or in between the Zygon ship and Forgill Castle, and Sarah's doing that thing. I love that it's just that slightly realistic thing of going, well, the door's open, so I'll go through it, but I'm not going to let myself get trapped, because then the viewer would be hollering at the screen, don't get yourself trapped. So instead she nips back out and just tests that she can get in and out again, and that this is obviously a movement sensitive door like those ones you get in the supermarket, but you certainly wouldn't have got in the supermarket in 1975. Well, I don't think so anyway. Don't write in. But I'm sure I remember movement-sensitive doors being quite new, and I'm from 1975. I'm from 1974, really. But you know what I mean. And it's great that Sarah has all of this agency, and that's a lovely that, because we just know that, we've seen Sister Lamont's Zygon 00, and great, and it closes up on the real Sister Lamont. Now my subtitles have said take Orla below. I think the Sister Lamont Zygon is called Odor or something, isn't it? But my subtitles have translated that to Orla, and I have a niece called Orla, who I don't think is a Zygon. Yes, this is one of the areas where the brilliance of the production makes me forgive the kind of fact that there's not very much security in the Zygon spaceship. I suppose, would you have security? Yeah, no, I think you'd have security, even if it was only you guys in the spaceship. They do say they've been there for centuries as well, didn't they? Centuries ago by your Earth time, which means they've been very patient. I bet they've read all those books in Forgill Castle. I remember this photo being in the inside cover of a Doctor Who magazine, and I think, did I use it as a poster? I loathe this abomination. I was slightly laughing at that because basically we need to cut away from Sarah and Harry in this brilliant shot of them hiding and bathed in this alien luminescence, and we need to cut to the Zygons in human form, and we need to hear them so that Sarah and Harry can register them. So it's like, I better give the Zygon a line of alien dialogue, and I loathe this abomination of a body, says poor old Lilius Walker, which is it is slightly sort of amusing alien sci-fi dialogue, but again, because it's all done with such utter conviction, and because these leads are all so brilliant, I love the dynamic between these four. I wish there was more Sarah, Harry, the Brigadier, and the Fourth Doctor. Now, but this bit's weird. Look how great Tom Baker is. He's just coolly there going, I need to assess that you're not the bad guys. And then as soon as he's sure, he breaks into that wonderful toothy grin. But I always find this bit a bit weird, that Doctor Who goes off and we're told it all from off screen, and then the Zygons, who we've never seen in this set before, are suddenly like interlopers in the sort of normal spooky castle investigative drama. We suddenly have them, and even I know they were we saw the one that killed Angus, but that was on that was largely on a CSO background because Sister Lamont had changed into the Zygon. So I still feel a slight sort of disassociation from that. Whereas this, suddenly seeing them here enter and having not seen what's happened to the Doctor, part of you goes, "Oh, that's quite a sort of cheap and easy way of orchestrating the action." He goes off, you hear the scream off, and then you see the Zygons, and it's sort of like noises off. But the other side of that is, we don't actually know what's happened to the Doctor. And so what is definitely a sort of cheap and easy to orchestrate manoeuvre also becomes dramatically quite helpful, because we still haven't seen what's happened to the Doctor. We've just heard him scream, and we've seen the Zygons sort of warning them and going, don't follow us, we've got the Doctor. But it is a sequence that always slightly takes me by surprise, because it's unusual to see the Doctor, I think, go and investigate a place and us not follow him, but instead hear him as sort of othered, as it was, and he's back. I was wondering, I couldn't remember whether we actually saw him again this episode. I wonder if it would have been more effective if we hadn't seen the Doctor again in this episode. That shot maybe has diminished. But look how good this lighting is, this shooting is. I love the way that Camfield must have been cock-a-hoop about those costumes. And these, I always wonder in things like this, when they blow up real bits of water, did they kill any fish then? They've certainly killed some worms, wouldn't they? Some animal life will have died by that explosion being rigged in that real body of water. And is that really worth it for a piece of televisual entertainment? I'm not sure that it is. Anyway, they're all. I mean, most of the human cast of this is dead now, so I can't go lamenting kelp. Well, no, kelp's not, but I can't go lamenting sandworms or marsh bugs or whatever. I remember an early summation of this that I'd read, saying that I think it was in the Doctor Who archives and fact file, actually, in Doctor Who magazine, that the Scarrison was no good. This is all great stuff as well. People covering their ears. You have the sound put on afterwards, and it all just builds the momentum of the episode to a climax, visually and aurally. But saying that the Zygon spaceship was not particularly good. But I think the underwater model is good. I think that model of it coming out of the water is excellent. I think it's that the CSO of this final shot isn't keyed brilliantly. It's improved now, I think, thanks to the restoration team. But I know, but I think some people don't think the external design of the spaceship quite works with the internal. But I think the spaceship's okay. That last CSO shot isn't amazing, and it's unfortunate that the cliffhanger to episode 2 is the Scarrison. The cliffhanger to episode 3 is some not great CSO, and the climax to episode 4 is as we will see, a puppet chewing a thing, which I wonder if that is a bit of a blow from which Zygons, which make Zygons perhaps sit on the outer reaches of the classics lists. I don't know where it was I don't know where it was in the latest Doctor Who magazine poll, where I think it actually did quite well. So maybe I'm just speaking personally. Maybe it's my hang-ups. Maybe it's what's prevented me from appreciating it. But again, what another lovely episode. I love all the spooky investigative stuff that they do in the castle. I love John Woodnutt as the Duke of Forgill. I think he's so good. But I love the whole dynamic of the regulars. I love all of... Well, those 5, let's add Benton to the mix, because John Levine is always at his best with Camfield. Well, he's always at his best with the dramatic stuff with Camfield. I think he's... I love his... when he does the humorous stuff, when he enters the TARDIS in the Three Doctors, and when he tells John Pertwee to knock him out in Invasion of the Dinosaurs. I love those bits. But he just ups his game on the dramatic stakes, and seems just a bit more confident when he's with Camfield. And I love this dynamic of these regulars. And I like the fact that it still feels part of the setup we've been used to for the past, few years of Pertwee. But also it does seem like it's moving away from it. So it's this strangely sort of sad transition that isn't disdainful of what's gone before. It's not trashing the unit legacy. It's the Brigadier. Although I noticed that Nicholas Courtney is credited after John Woodnutt, so he's very much having had second billing in season 8. He's now not even first billed guest actor. Anyway, that's all the sort of stuff that only bothers me. What do I like about episode 3? Well, I adore the fleeting shot of the Zygon as it is pursued through the woods. I love all of the filming of the Zygons within the spaceship. I love that investigative stuff. I love them nipping over to Forgill Castle and all that explanatory stuff that gives us the logic of how the Loch Ness monster is only occasionally seen, and how the Zygons carry out their day-to-day stuff, and how they've managed to remain hidden but active, and all of that stuff, which I think is good adventure plotting. But then we've got the sort of doppelganger body horror thing. I love that we have a bit of blood. We very rarely have blood in Doctor Who, but a bit of blood on Sister Lamont's arm, because she is the Zygon who's been shot in the arm. And of course, any doppelganger story has always got a really exciting and scary element to it. The parody of humanity. Even though it does have, I think the Harry being given free reign of the spaceship and Sarah being able to get in and sort of rescue him without an alarm going off or anything is that lesser stories I would have ripped a new one for that, but I don't kind of mind. And partially I think there's a suggestion there's not that many Zygons, but again, that is kind of joke, isn't it, when the Doctor says, isn't it a bit big for the 6 of you? Oh, I can see a robin outside washing himself in our bird bath. That makes me very, very happy. As does, he's having a great time, he's loving it. He's getting right under there, under his wings. Mate. The simple pleasures. Now, good. I've got a very refreshed Robin now, charging about in the garden. My favourite, I think, episode 3. Now, I'm definitely want to choose John Woodnut because it's such a wonderful performance, and I think he really, I really love what he does in episode 4, but he does plenty of stuff here, and I kind of want to get in there with him. Do I? Am I playing a tactical game? That never ends well for me. What else are things that are? Is there anything that I can choose that's particular? Well, I do like the chase of. I love that shot. I love that shot, that barely glimpsed shot of the Zygon in the trees. Maybe I'll save Woodnut till episode 4 because I know that guest stars and guest actors are very much my sort of thing, and Daisy might not choose that, or might be late to choose that. Maybe I have to choose the Zygon design now because she's chosen the spaceship and she's chosen Evil Harry, and we have to choose the Zygons, don't we? And I chose the end of episode 1 and the pitchfork scene. So I think I have to choose the Zygon design now. I think because I think if she is going to choose the same two things as me, and I don't know that she will, I need to get in there sooner rather than later. And I think I'm on borrowed time. I'd have chosen the Zygon design for episode 1 and the Zygon design for episode 2, and it's interesting that brilliantly shot though those interiors are in the spaceship, and the way that Camfield frames the Zygons in close-up and in slight profile, or favouring Broton with one behind him or whatever. The actual shot I really love is the one of it in the distance. It just goes to show that a brilliant design can stand up to sort of different ways of shooting, and be compelling in different ways. Just that, I love that half glimpse shot. I don't know why. I think it's because we're used to seeing forests, but to suddenly see this sort of blobby orange alien thing just flitting through is actually really quite disorienting and scarifying. I love the Zygon. James Atchison, my goodness, and so much that is great about that Zygon design. Yes, please. The Zygon design is my choice for episode 3 of Terror of the Zygons. Let's hope she doesn't choose John Woodnut now, because, spoiler alert, that's what I'm going to choose for episode 4. I think, I don't know, because I react as I've seen. But my instinct is, and I get 2 choices, of course, for part 4 anyway, but I'm certainly going in there. I'll be playing for Team Woodnut, but let's see what happens as I'm gabbing along, because sometimes I change my mind. I don't normally plan ahead what I'm going to choose, but I've had to be a little bit tactical here, because it's such an embarrassment of riches if I choose a thing this episode, and I do feel that Woodnut really comes into his own next week. But let's not spoil next week. And anyway, I might change my mind, but I think I have to choose the Zygon design. Let's see, but with special mention to that shot of it flitting through the trees. Let's see what Daisy chooses for part 3.
Third thing. Now then, the third thing I'm going to talk about is it's quite a personal one for my family. Every time we watch this particular story. Now then, you'll remember Angus as second sight. So somebody inevitably in my family at some point in the third episode, when Angus meets his doom, will say, he didn't see that coming. And then when it does the close-up of the deer's head, somebody else will go, yeah, no idea. It had to be there. It's one of those things. But it's a definite family tradition in our house.
I love that. Even though that has sort of spelled my doom in terms of winning this, that I love that. Daisy, you're wonderful. That obviously there was no chance that I would ever get that, but I love that exists, because we all have our. This is the beauty of Doctor Who. You see, I was talking to Doctor Who. A regular Doctor Who performer who I was staying with this weekend in order to make a film for a DVD Blu-ray that I can't talk about. About they said what's the appeal of Doctor Who? Why do you think? And I was talking, and they touched upon it about it getting you when you were a kid, and it is tied up with childhood. Where if you have a good childhood, it's a reminder of a more innocent time. If you had a difficult childhood, it was probably the bit that made you happy in a difficult childhood. That's definitely, I think the thing for me. And the last violin is not playing. I lived in a nice house, and I was fed, and all of that. It was more of a psychologically difficult childhood than one of deprivation, shall we say. And it's all relative, and I'm aware that many people had far greater things to contend with. But you can only deal with what you have, and I found my childhood quite difficult. But the thing that got me through it, and the thing that wiped the tears from my eyes, was my utter fascination with Doctor Who, and the fact that Doctor Who was this thing that everybody seemed to sort of know about, but I had a special power in, if you like. It was very much but mostly it was that it gave me great glee and great joy, and there was always something to find out about. It was finding out about who the companions. Suddenly you'd discover, you'd pick up a book and you go, oh, I've never heard of Ben and Polly. I had actually heard of Ben and Polly because I remember exactly where I was the first time I heard of Ben and Polly. We were playing outside, and I think I was talking about, I said, oh, I've seen the cover for Doctor Who and the Cybermen, and my brother was saying, oh yeah, Ben and Polly are in that one, and they're the companions in the 10th Planet. They're the companions that see out the first Doctor and see in the second Doctor. And I'd never heard of Ben and Polly, and they seemed all very exciting. I remember the first time I knew who Joe was because of Joe Alone, the opening chapter of Planet of the Daleks. So when you find, because the only way you found out about this stuff, or I did, was picking up a Target book, and suddenly there'd be those whole new characters you were supposed to sort of know about. So there was always something new to learn or to discover, and the Doctor and the Loch Ness Monster was very much one of those books at around that time. It was one of the early books. It was one of the books we always had. I don't remember it being new. I remember us always having it. And it's got a brilliant cover with the Scarrison and the Zygon and Tom Baker in the middle, and it's a great Chris Achilleos sort of composition. I love those Target novels. I love the work of Chris Achilleos. He was a very, very talented man, and etched the excitement of my childhood in brilliantly rendered imagery, and of course brilliantly captured likenesses of photographs I then later saw. And it all then ties together. Beautiful. But of course we all have our things that we do. Interesting that I invoked my cynical brothers being cynical about it, because I'm even though they'd grown up captured by and loved Doctor Who. And in fact I remember one of my brothers talking in hushed tones about Zygon Harry and how scary Zygons was. But then they got to a certain age. There's 4 years between me and the next up, which is my sister, and then there's a year of my brother, and there's a year and another brother. So I've got 3 older siblings, but who are all quite close together, and then a bit of a gap to me. So of course, not only was I younger, but when I was a sort of snivelling teenager, they were older teenagers who of course think younger teenagers are idiots, and they had outgrown childish things, as it were. So I would hope they'd wander in and see me watching a Doctor and go, oh, this is amazing, but usually they'd go, why have they done that? Or that's rubbish. I mean, I've just invented some that they might have done whilst watching Terror of the Zygons. Although I have to say, I remember watching Pyramids of Mars when my brother walked in, and him telling me that that's when Doctor Who was good, and it was this modern stuff that was rubbish. So times, things change and things stay the same in many ways. Anyway, but it is tied up with family, and I do think of my family dynamic in terms of Doctor Who a bit. I wish I'd have sort of liked to have had Daisy's stuff with family joshing, having fun. Although no, maybe I wouldn't have done, because if I'd been watching that and my family had said, well, he didn't see that coming, or no idea, I'd have probably got really prickly at that time because I needed absolute concentration in Doctor Who. I didn't want people heckling it, or even in good humour. There's a place for good humour. There's a place for fun, and it's not in Doctor Who. But because that was me at the time, because I didn't want it spoiled. So and to be fair, my family tended to very much. I wasn't allowed to I wasn't prioritised for much because I was the youngest, and usually what the three of them needed to do, was there was more likely to be a thing that suited all three of them and not me than there was a thing that suited me that all three of them could do. So I never often felt particularly sort of prioritised. But to be fair, my absolute devotion to Doctor Who was, understood and accommodated. So there would be no question of when Doctor Who was on, anybody watching anything else. If I was watching it on video and they wanted to watch something, I'd get booted out, or whatever. But my love of Doctor Who was tolerated, and it was accommodated and accepted. Mildly piss taken out of as well, but that's kind of what the dynamic was anyway. So I also sort of slightly envy Daisy's dynamic, but that's not to say that our dynamic didn't have that, and that was entirely everybody else's fault. As I say, I was a little bit touchy and a little bit defensive about Doctor Who. So even if my family had probably thought they were just joining in and having a good time with that, like Daisy's family obviously do, that was a shared communal family joke. I love that. I think that's very sweet. I would have probably scuppered that with my own uptightness. I hope I'm beyond that now, and that actually, because I think I wanted everyone to take Doctor Who so terribly seriously, which is mad, because the whole thing about the Doctor is that the Doctor the Doctor undermines the villains by not taking them seriously. That doesn't mean that the programme sends them up. The programme is at its best when it takes the villains absolutely seriously. But the Doctor, it's what Tom Baker's Doctor does so well, is that he pricks through the pomposity of all of that, and that's quite a line to tread, because you don't want the programme undermining the monsters or the bad guys, because then it becomes a comedy programme, then it becomes a bit postmodern, then it's tipping a wink to the audience, and that's cheap and that's really easy to do. But for the Doctor to have that sort of anarchic, I'm going to cut through your highfalutin extraterrestrial attitudes and dialogue is the lesson to go. The way you take down despots is to not take them too seriously, because they're all pumped up and pompous or arrogant, or even the most powerful dictator is probably somebody that look at somebody, everyone from, or from Kim Jong Il to Donald Trump to and people from all political persuasions, people who've become sort of powerful despots, all have their own sort of pathetic little personality flaws that show that actually they're just human beings like the rest of us. And it's the same with some on high alien pronouncement is still done by you're still just a creature, you're still just a person in inverted commas, and the Doctor cuts through all of that by being funny and by being witty and by not being impressed by the strutting of power, and that's a great element of the show's central character. But the show's central character has to do that whilst not sort of going, but these things are silly and aren't threatening. Even if they're made of obvious rubber or are a badly CSO'd glove puppet or whatever, the Doctor has to to tell the audience, the actor has to tell the audience, this is scary and life-threatening, whilst the doctor is going, but I'm going to brazen this out by being mocking in order to buy myself some time, or in order to press their buttons, because, despite this facade of power underneath, they're still, like we all are, needy and pathetic. And the doctor kind of knows that. And it's but the most important thing, I think, in today's climate of discussion and attitudes, is that we lose our sense of humour at our peril. And I was very much like that about Doctor Who when I was younger, is that I took it so seriously. Even somebody looking at it in a funny way would be enough to make me really upset and ruin my day. And you've got to let that go. So I love Daisy's family for being able to have that wonderful, fun, shared dynamic that, as she sort of said, you had to be there. It means kind of nothing, really, unless you were there. But isn't that wonderful that we have those things that are just our little dynamics that have come organically from the chemistry between us, because we're either a family or a group of friends. We've all got jokes, haven't we, in jokes between mates that have come just because of the different sort of conglomeration of our personalities and outlooks, that they share something that then means something unique and particular to just us at just a particular time. And I think Doctor Who, because it permeates family, because it crosses generations, because it is tied in with our past, because most of us are introduced to it when we're children, because it is often reminiscent of, if not family time, then friends time. Those of us that haven't had, big families who've watched together, because I don't want to exclude anybody. I'm aware that for many people it's just been a solo pursuit or whatever. Hopefully there's, there are groups of friends that you have that with, or networks now in the internet of people that you've never met, that you might somehow have an in-joke or a bit of a shared dynamic, or just a bit of a a shared dynamic. I think is I've said it. I always stretch that. I always try to just go that little bit further and run out of steam. Which let's stop this episode from doing that. I think that ship may have sailed, Toby. But anyway. I enjoyed that. I particularly loved Daisy's choice. I was never going to get that in a million years. Wouldn't it have been great if I'd gone, I think my favourite thing about episode 3 is the thing that the Connolly family used to do. Anyway, thanks to Daisy. Thanks for listening. Let's see what happens when the spaceship goes to London in episode 4 of Terror of the Zygons. But that is next time. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and I hope you, like a robin in a bird bath, have been refreshed and invigorated by this. You won't have been. That's the last thing this will have done. But I was just trying to tie it neatly all together. You really had to be there. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Daisy Connolly, who can be found on Twitter at Dazed, D-A-I-Z-E-D. I'm grateful to Daisy and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Peter Adamson, Andrew and Lisa, Catherine Armitage, John Arnold, Kevin Ashleford, Luke Atkins, James Bell, David Bickley, Will Brooks, Rick Byatt, Gary Byrne, Robin Bland, Robbie C., Alex Kafajoglu, Paul Carnahan, Paul Carrington, Andy Case, John Curley, Mark Dakin, Rob Dawson, John Elledge, Mark Findlay Smith, Joe Ford, Gary Gillett, Paul Goodridge, James Gould, Lisa C. Greco, David Gould, David Green, Fraser Gregory, Paul Gregory, Legion Henderson, Dave Hoskin, Richie Howarth, Robert Jewell, Andrew Jordan, Christopher Joyce, Jess Jerkovic, Ashley Knight, Andy Kitching, Clive Lewis, Guy Lambert. The music was by Dave Gates and the artwork Dylan Patterson. If, like me, you struggle with day-to-day life, then there's a new app and podcast that can sort it all out. I live in Islington and I'm really, really happy. It's a podcast that takes away that, you see, it would be awful if I had to use adverts to sustain this thing, because then I'd have to spout crap like that. Instead, I have the Patreon model. All those names you heard then prevent me from having to go, yes, I used to find eating a problem, but then Eaty food sorted out my problem by I pay it's very affordable. I pay just 97 pence a day, and Eaty food cooks my food for me and feeds it to me like the baby I am. Men, are you skinny? They stopped me having to do anything like that. I mean, I wouldn't anyway. I'd feel like a charlatan and a fraud. Although that said, I do voiceovers for adverts in my professional life, but I feel it would somehow sully this, which is an endeavour that is free at the point of contact. So it's almost exactly the same as the NHS, except in almost every discernible way. But at patreon.com/Toby Haydock, you could be one of the people who has their names read out, which stops me from even contemplating doing adverts, having advertisements on these podcasts. And for as little as £3 a month, you get early access to the podcast, 6 months early in the cases of Happy Times and Places. You get exclusive podcasts, you get material that's just for you, monthly AMAs, and various other treats. And you get a £10 discount if you sign up for a year. And if the Patreon model is not for you, you can sort of fling some money into my tip jar, essentially, on Ko-fi, kofi.com/Toby Haydock. It pretends that paying for a service is like buying me a coffee, which I suppose it kind of is. And you can also do the free option, the option which costs you no money at all. And I completely understand that in this day and age where everything's expensive. I've just seen our electricity bill. And that's actually not true. I'm aware of what our electricity... that was like me doing an advert. I've just seen our electricity bill, and I've thought of ways of making it cheaper. If I listen to the podcast Electric Wick Wick, presented by a yummy mummy from Islington, who says you don't have to pay electricity bills if you wear a Breton shirt and eat organic food. Stop it. Anyway, listen, yes, I know times are tough. Times are tough financially for all of us. And one of the reasons podcasts are so great is that they you get good quality stuff. I hope that's what this is. I'm not claiming it so to be, but if you're listening to it, I hope you enjoy it. That is absolutely free. But if you'd like to support it, and if you'd like to make this verbal diarrhea seem somehow worthwhile, a 5-star review. We live in a very binary universe where nothing less than 5 stars will do, unfortunately. There's no subtlety, there's no nuance, there's no gradation of skill. It's either brilliant or just don't bother, which really helps to get the word out there and helps these get more visibility and mean that more people will listen to them. So a 5-star rating and a few lines of review really help this podcast to get out there into the great wide world. Now, the beauty of me being so behind schedule that I'm releasing this to patrons one episode at a time. Normally, I'd try and get the whole story done and then pop it out. But I've been filming... I don't think I mentioned this. I think I mentioned this in take 1 of the introduction. I've been away filming a sequel to Living with Levine and A Weekend with Waterhouse. So a threequel, the third in that series. I've spent the weekend with a Doctor Who regular for a Blu-ray release that isn't even on the schedule. So if somebody drops a hint that they've done something, or you see something, or a Doctor Who actor says, I've just done an interview for this, don't think that means the Blu-ray is anytime soon. We're doing stuff that isn't even scheduled. I've done all the Tom Baker commentaries that we're going to do, but that's even for some sets that aren't planned. So it's because we're getting the stuff done now. Russell Minton has been brilliant in ensuring that we get as much stuff in the can as soon as we can, which is great. And it means that we can then relax about I have nothing to do with it. That there's a more relaxed attitude to the release schedule because we can still be fitting things in and moving stuff about, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, so that's why I'm really behind, and I'm recording this of a morning when nobody's got up yet, which is why the Robin was having a morning bath to invigorate him for the day. And I'm sorry if just towards, in this little coda, you heard an aeroplane. Normally, I would lock myself in my booth and get rid of all external sound. But that rumble you heard when I was, just at the end of talking about the Patreon bit. That was an aeroplane. Let's pretend it was the Zygon spaceship coming back round again, and just to give a bit of a realistic feel to the end of this episode. Anyway, Andrew Llewellyn has made, who's one of the poor dupes who sends their hard-earned money to my Patreon page, www.patreon.co.uk/Toby Haydock. You don't need the www.Toby, I know, but I'm very old-fashioned. Andrew says, great podcast as always, Toby. Your uncertainty, this is me about the decompression chamber in episode 2. Your uncertainty about the decompression chamber is understandable, but the science is correct. Air pressure is increased in the chamber with a high level of oxygen, which can poison the blood in theory. By slowing down Sarah's breathing in the trance, the doctor reduces her intake, keeping her healthy. The script doesn't really explain this, I'm afraid, but the doctor definitely doesn't have a superpower, so it's okay. I love that. Thank you so much, Andrew. That is it. Now I'm getting pings on my phone. Aeroplanes, pings. This is a very unprofessional episode of Happy Times and Places with external sound that I wouldn't normally allow in a professional broadcast. But let's say that we're doing guerrilla filmmaking. It's not filmmaking, guerrilla podcast making, that I decided not to traipse all the way and get all the wires and plug all that just to record this end bit in the proper sound booth. So sorry about that, but it proves that I live in a house and I am not AI generated living in a computer dwelling. So sorry about all the noise, but I thought Andrew's contribution there was rather splendid. So thank you for that. And Guy Lambert says, you inspired me to rewatch this whole story, and it's been glorious, as it is every time I revisit it. Thanks, Guy. I hope that's what this does. But anyway, there we go. I hope you've enjoyed that, and thanks particularly to patrons who give me conversation points and give me feedback and make me think I'm not alone. None of us are alone. As a Doctor Who fan, you're never alone. I mean, sometimes looking at Twitter, I wish we bloody were, but generally though, it's good in it. Yeah, it's good.